There's a huge amount of concern in relation to a cohort of patients that are relying on new drugs and treatments. And in this year's budget, bizarrely, that funding has been basically taken away in relation to new treatments and drugs. Now, this will affect thousands of patients. In fact, I got an email, like all TDs here, in relation to a person that was relying on a particular drug, and they've been told by their doctor they will not get it, and they will have to leave the jurisdiction. Now, this is a case of life and death, and there's consequences for a lot of people. Now, this is bizarre. This country is awash with money, yet, you know, people will have to go without. So just could you give clarity in relation to that particular issue, particularly for them access to these new drugs? Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Just in relation to Deputy Durkin's question, it is always a struggle for health to come in on budget, no matter what the increase is given in any year, whether it's a big or small increase, and that's particularly so in the acute hospitals. It's much less so in the community or in PCRS, which generally do come in pretty close to budget. And there are areas that, in fairness to the HSE and Department of Health, just aren't under their control and can't be predicted. For example, pension costs. Never know for sure how many people will retire, and also things like the State Claims Agency, because that's all subject to court judgments. Deputy Callan raised the issue of the delay in opening an autism unit in Kilmore. I don't know the reason for the delay, but we will do all we can to make sure it opens and opens as soon as possible. And I'll make sure my office takes that up with Minister Madigan, and I'll ask her to come back to him directly. Deputy Moynihan raised the issue of respite, and an additional 10 million has been allocated for additional new respite services in 2024. The CAF scheme, I think, is operated by Department of Housing under Minister Bryan. I'll have to double check that and revert to the Deputy. The whole issue of assessments of needs and people waiting far too long for an assessment of need, that is quite fraught. A lot of it is linked to court judgments and court decisions that have ruled that assessments of needs need to be a very long process, I think something like 30 hours. And sadly, as a consequence of that, a lot of the resources are going into assessments of needs rather than treatments and therapies. And I think that's a real problem, and one that we're going to have to deal with. And then the issue of allowing people to go privately and reimbursing them, that's currently under consideration. But I know Mr Rabbit and Mr Gorman are keen to do a pilot of that next year, and I support them in their efforts. But we need to make sure it's done right, that the capacity is actually there, and that there are terms and conditions and standards that apply. Deputy O'Murray mentioned the recruitment moratorium. I think it is important to put on the record of the House that it is a partial recruitment moratorium. It only applies until the end of the year, and only applies where the HSE has already recruited the number of people at that grade that they're funding for. Unfortunately, in some cases, they've over-recruited and have recruited people they don't have funding for, and that has, in many ways, led to the problem. I do want to make it clear that the HSE will be able to increase its total headcount by 2,000 next year. So far from there being a reduction in staff working in the health service next year, they'll be allowed to hire an additional 2,000 staff next year on top of the 23,000 hired since this government came to office. But we'll need to make sure they hire the right 2,000, not just any 2,000. And that's something that we'll be engaging with the HSE CEO and his team on. The carers means test has been relaxed in the budget for 2024, and Minister Humphreys will set that out in the social welfare bill. In response to Mr Murphy's question, or Deputy Murphy's question, just want to make it very clear that we will work with the HSE CEO and his team to put together a credible service plan, and we'll do that now between now and the end of the year, and that will involve a supplementary for this year, which I think everyone is aware of. But I do want to recall what the HSE CEO Bernard Gloucester said. The emergency department plan is funded, and there are 100 fewer patients waiting on a bed today than was the case, 120 fewer patients waiting on a bed today than was the case this time last year. The extra beds, the extra ICU beds, all funded. The waiting list plan is all funded as well.